Servus and hello, Matthias here, and this is Singletrack. This is Rock Candy Running's final race week for the year. Our brand new 10K trail race, Saturnalia, in the newly renamed Squaxin Park in Olympia is happening this Saturday, December 17th. Registration is open until the 15th. There's still time to join the fun. Visit rockcandyrunning.com to sign up and come race with us. All right, holiday treat for y'all. Jeremy Anderson is back on the show. Jeremy joined us early in the year as one of the few finishers of the mighty Mount Baker Ultra. But in this episode, he's sharing his experience running this year's Barkley Fall Classic. Yes, the infamous race in the infamous place. The intro race to the Big Daddy everyone dreams of and hardly anyone finishes. We talk about Laz, Frozen Head State Park, Briars, and humidity. If you're in need of some inspiration to get yourself out the door in these gross winter months, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the show. It's now like the end of November, and as per usual, I like to check in with a few people about their summer. And your summer, as always, often was a terrific, sort of pinnacling in doing you actually racing the Barkley Fall Classic. But I think before we talk about Barkley Fall Classic, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the summer. How was it out there? How were the mountains?
They were pretty good. I don't think I got out as much as I wanted to, but I kind of always feel that way because there's just so much to do around the country and just in Washington. So
it is one of those like weird things where you lay out your plan. This is my summer. You have certain objectives, and then there's certain objectives rolling over from the previous year that you haven't completed, and then this new stuff you explore and stuff, and so it becomes like this endless, ever-growing list of things that you don't get done. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, and my brain just keeps coming up with more routes. There's just more to do. But I felt like I had a good balance of races this year and getting out in the mountains. So that was good. After the Mount Baker Ultra that we talked about previously, I ran the Sawtooth 50K. I stepped down from the 50 miler because it was only like a month after the Mount Baker Ultra, and the 50K went really well. It ended up that they ran it on a snow course, and the year before they had canceled the race because it was supposed to be like 105, 110 degree weather out there. So it was like a completely different weather setup that changed the course, but didn't cancel it this year. So that was good too.
Yeah, that is very good. Exactly. We did have a crazy summer. I mean, Beast of Big Creek was for this year, late July. And we still had some snow up at the summit, which was also super rare and crazy. Did that impact you in the way you planned on certain routes? Did you do certain winter routes later in the year, or other things you didn't really do?
I think there's times where I get out more in the spring, so that just ended up being pushed back more into like starting in late June and early July.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many places where when the weather is decent and the snowpack is like really packed down, right? Where you can actually travel over certain areas where you don't really expect. Like some people, I don't know if you've ever done it, but that Mount Washington, Mount Eleanor's traverse, people are always saying if there's packed snow, it's actually much easier travel than if you wait until everything's melted out.
Yeah, because everything fills in. You don't have to travel as much, like the boulders and the scree. loose screed. That's always difficult in the Olympics.
Oh, exactly.
It's kind of filled in.
Is it unusual for you to do that many races over the summer? I don't really have you pegged as somebody who is really focused on races.
It's kind of been off and on. I've done more in the past and I've done less in the past. I just might not talk about them as much on social media.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It is a little tricky when you're focused on doing races. That cuts into your sort of mountain adventure time, right? I mean, because you're specifically training, you're recovering. There are certain things you don't want to do 2 weeks before the race, just in case you get injured or something, right? It affects how much playtime you get in the mountains.
Yeah, that's definitely been something hard to balance, because if you want to perform your best at a race, you really need to kind of hone in those last 2 months, and that limits what you do in the mountains in that period of time. And you can try to like train, use like adventures in the mountains as training runs, but sometimes you go a little overboard.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, for the kind of races that you're doing, it might work, but sometimes mountain adventures don't really lend themselves to real focused training because you're route finding so much. You are potentially spending more time traversing off-trail stuff, right? Where you get time on feet, but you're not really getting good dedicated running, right?
Yeah, and yeah, the travel time can be a lot slower than what you would want to do at race pace.
Yeah, exactly.
So that specificity kind of falls.
So, I mean, we need to talk now. Well, perhaps we should talk a little bit about Sawtooth. That race is kind of a newer race from the Everlong folks because they took it over. Am I correct?
Yeah, he didn't necessarily take it over because I don't think he bought it from Rain Shadow Running, but made a similar race in that area.
Yeah, I guess that's the fairer way of saying it. It is a very tricky area because of weather patterns, wildfires, and snow, right? I mean, it is a unique area, but it is very tricky to get to consistently put on a race, right?
Yeah, and it's also very remote too, so there's some difficulty in that. But yeah, I think before it got canceled because of wildfires, and then they didn't put it on again after that.
So you ran it. Give us a quick snapshot. Is it worth it? Is it a cool race?
Yeah, it's definitely an awesome race. The climbing was way more than expected. I was signed up for the 50 miler, and on that day I was attempting to do the 50 miler, and he advertised like 13 or 14,000 feet of gain.
Okay.
But I think with the snow course change, it ended up being around 16 or 17,000 feet of gain. So I ended up dropping down to the 50K.
Oh man, how much vert was in the 50K then?
On my device, I was already at 13,000, so kind of what I expected to do for the day.
Yeah. That is crazy. If you drop down, did you just drop down at race day? Did you just tell him before you started, I don't think I'm gonna do the 50K miler. Can I finish 50K? Or did you just finish at the 50K point? How did you kind of announce that to the race director?
Well, I guess I got to it was like, I think it was around 43 miles. So I technically didn't run a 50K. It was like 43 miles, but he just gave me the 50K finish. I essentially dropped out of the 50 miler, but he gave me a 50K finish there.
Okay, and that's perfect though. I mean, if the course allows it and if there's flexibility, I appreciate that as both race director and runner.
And I think that had to do with it being the snow course, which he didn't really know how that would work out, and just the first year race too.
Yeah. There were lots of variables. I think I heard somebody else saying that that course was quite a bit different than advertised, which, I mean, that sometimes happens, right? Sometimes it's variable just in the way different watches pick things up. Sometimes it's, especially with ultras, it's tough because you can't really run them continuously for training as a race director to figure things out. So you have to stitch different GPS pieces together, so it takes a little bit. So
yeah.
So with you doing Sawtooth, was this for you a highlight of the summer that you like really put out there as a summer effort, or was it already a sort of a training run and leading up for you towards Barkley Fall?
I think it was one of my main efforts, but I underestimated how close it was to Mount Baker Ultra and how quickly my body would recover after that event.
I can see that. Because Mount Baker was also, with the weather and with everything, right? It was an exceptionally brutal effort.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. So, before we go into Barkley, any other highlights for the summer? Anything else you sort of accomplished or put your mark on?
Something I did after the Barkley Fall Classic that I've done before is the traverse from Upper Lena Lake to Lake of the Angels.
Yes.
And that's a great route.
I think that's one of those routes that I hear people talking about it over and over again, and many people are, I don't know if nervous, uncertain, I think is a good term, but you keep doing it. Can you explain the route a little bit, and then I'll see if I need to pick up a couple pieces.
Yeah, so you head up to Upper Lena Lake from Lena Lake Trailhead, and then you follow the ridge over, and there's just like gorgeous views of the Brothers, Mount Brotherton, Mount Lena, and then further back in the Olympics, I think Mount Anderson, probably a few other peaks. And then you drop down a little bit towards some lakes, and then you ascend up kind of to I don't know if it's a col or I'm not sure, between Mount Stone and another rock pinnacle. And there's a little bit of ice and glacier left at that point. And so that section can be a little more intense than the rest of the section, because the rest of it's kind of just subalpine with a few open views, but like pretty runnable for what my pace is. But then it's a very hard climb up after you're traversing on a ridge to that gap between Mount Stone and I think it's a numbered peak, like 5,495 or something.
That's funny. What's the total miles and vert on that route?
If you take the road, I think it's that's what we did. We did it as a loop instead of a car, like point to point. And that was about 20 miles with, I think it was 6,500 feet of climbing.
Okay, so that's not so bad, and the road is doable, and I guess that's why people like it because you have the option of you're starting at Lena Lake or heading Lena Lake Trailhead, and then coming down at Lake of the Angels Trailhead. This is just a few miles up the road. You can actually easily run that back down when you're done, right?
Yeah, or take bikes or drive 2 cars.
Yeah, so exactly. That's a lot easier from a traversing point than a lot of other traverse possibilities in the Olympics where you might end up coming down a complete different river valley and you have 40-minute car ride in between. This is actually doable, and a total of 20 miles and 6,500 feet is also, at least on paper, doable. From the off-travel part, how would you describe it from a risk danger factor? How, what kind of trail runner do you need to be in order to do this?
I think there might be a little bit of, I don't know, Class 2 or Class 3 terrain on that one gap I was talking about. And some seasons you might want to bring spikes because it might be exposed ice or snow.
Oh, yeah.
So at some times a year, you might need an axe and crampons, so it's definitely not the easiest.
No, for sure. So it's definitely a section where you have your hands on the rock.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Nice. That's, I mean, I hope, do you have a Strava file for that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, we need to link that because I know that a lot of people have been talking about this traverse, and we need to give people some hints how they can follow your footsteps. We won't hold you accountable for it, but at least so people can check out the route. Okay, so that is a route that you did late in the season. I mean, we had such a crazy, unseasonable, dry and warm, hello climate change, fall, that it totally opened up the possibilities for doing a whole bunch of stuff. While the daytime was getting shorter, it was completely dry and even warm in many ways, right?
Yeah, I think I was wearing shorts until October 15th. There's some 80 degree days in there when normally it's starting to cool off.
Yeah, you got to be a little smarter because you have less daylight, and once you're in the shade it gets cold quickly, right? But I mean, the fact that it's dry for us here in the Pacific Northwest obviously is very tempting to go out and do stuff late in the season.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So that one we definitely have to link. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Barkley Fall Classic. You did it. No, I mean, it is one of, last races are so infamous in many ways. You did Barkley Fall Classic. Is there a lottery to get in, or how do they determine? Because I'm sure the demand is outrageous.
Yeah, it's a little different than the big one.
I mean, a lot different.
Easier to get in. So they just start a wait list from the get-go, and they just let people in as time goes on. And I think a lot of people drop out because they realize they're in over their head. And there's a lot of info coming out talking about the difficulty, and that scares people off.
So everyone knows about the insanity, not just difficulty, insanity of the Barkley marathons. The Barkley Fall Classic is essentially a taster, an introduction to what the real Barkley is all about, because it happens on the same terrain in the same state park on many of the same trails, but it is somewhat marked, and it's a 50K. So in theory, it's doable in a sense that the other one barely is. So what attracted you to want to drive all the way to Tennessee? We've got mountains out here. That's for me always the question that, like, unless I completely want to torture myself, I would never want to go to Tennessee to run around some state park. It doesn't sound visually appealing. What made you want to do it?
Just an interest after hearing so many stories about the big Barkley, and yeah, I just wanted to see what it was all about, and I love those steep climbs that are insane to go up, and most people don't seek out.
So I should ask you beforehand. So without, how was your perspective before you went out there? Did you think this is going to be a test run, and at some point I would sign up for the Barkley Marathons, or was it like, I want to get a taste of what this place is, but Barkley Marathons is completely out of my interest and league and everything?
Yeah, I think think I just wanted to get a taste and see what it was all about. And I might think about going back there for other races. I'm really interested in Strolling Gym. And yeah, I guess that's the only East Coast races I've heard of.
Okay. I mean, the East Coast is very different in terrain, right? Because you've got, I don't know, I had a couple of people from the East Coast on the show, and they describe how gnarly the actual trails are, that are, in some respects, harder than the trails, not necessarily stuff that we travel, in the mountains off trail. But when it comes to races and routes that we get to do over here on the West Coast based on public lands permitting and stuff, some of these trails over there, they are harder than what we have over here. Would you agree with that based on your experience?
The limited trails I saw, I thought they were pretty similar to some of the harder and hardest trails in the Olympics.
Okay, so Barkley Fall Classics, describe a little bit sort of the atmosphere and stuff. So how many runners are there? And, I think everyone who listens to this podcast has at some point watched clips from the Barkley Marathons. But Barkley Fall Classic is somewhat different. Describe it a little bit before we get into your actual race.
Yeah, unlike the big Barkley, there's about 400 people that run it.
Oh, wow.
I think it's only like 35 for the big Barkley. And so, yeah, he's just really giving all those people a taste of it. And everybody's just really nice and stoked to be there. And everybody has a little bit of trepidation going into it because they don't know what is going to be thrown at them.
Yeah.
And there's talks of like rattlesnakes and crazy poisonous bugs and animals and plants. And so it's just been like built up. Some people get in with like a year, and so they have a year to think about all these different things that they're going to encounter out there. Mm-hmm. And then the heat and humidity.
So, I mean, you prepared yourself for all of this. Do you feel like you were well prepared? Do you feel like you mentally too, right? Because as you say, when people read up on this place, and so there's hype, but there's also sort of a knowledge of what this place is all about. How did it sort of compare to your expectations?
It definitely lived up to the hype. I didn't feel like I prepared well enough for the heat and humidity. I felt like I prepared enough for the climbs because that's like readily available in Washington. It's getting out on steep terrain. And yeah, I just didn't like when you see the videos from the winter, it just looks like a barren, desolate forest. But this time of year, it reminded me a lot of Hawaii and kind of tropical in a way, like really humid, lots of vegetation, lots of bug noises. And so I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. Exactly. And then all that vegetation that traps the humidity, right? So that's brutal.
So I thought landscaping out in 80, 85 degree weather would be okay for that. But on race day, I think it was like 100% humidity in the morning. And I was just sweating all my fluids out of my body very early on in the race.
Oh man, I mean that's the worst, especially Barkley and that Frozen Head State Park is so known for an absolute crazy hard terrain, and if you then have to deal with humidity, that's something that you don't really prepare for, right? I mean, you can say, okay, I have to do an obscene amount of climbing and I have to do all this navigation and stuff. But yeah, humidity gets thrown at you as an added bonus.
Yeah, and the year before, it rained the whole time, like torrential downpours, and people said that people were getting hypothermic. So the weather just varies so much. There's like someone was telling me you could get up to the peak and it'd be like 40 degrees even during the summer, which I was surprised by with how hot it was. And
Yeah. I mean, this is such a crazy, weird, like microclimate almost, right? Where the weather really plays an additional sort of a trick on you. So obviously, I don't know, for you running the Barkley Fall Classic, like you are not really vowed to secrecy, right? I mean, you can't bring a GPS device onto for the race, but other than that, you can talk about it, right? Okay. So, do you have any sense of how much of the trails are similar than, I don't know if that's even a fair question, but I'm trying to figure out, like, do you feel like you got a good sense based on the terrain and based on the location of what the main Barkley marathons is all about in terms of terrain and what you experienced?
yeah, I would say it was a pretty small portion of that, and yeah, you definitely get more feel for the park, but there's a lot more of the park that's out there that you don't get to see.
Yeah. Laz gives you a little teaser just to either demoralize you to never want to come back or get you hooked in a way that you're like, okay, I guess I gotta explore this now.
But yeah, definitely could see how steep the hills are and get more feel for like spatial awareness in the whole area and how open the vegetation is and how dense it is in other places.
So for the main Barkley, you get a map and you have to find books. How is it different for the Fall Classic?
They, instead of books, they had hole punches, and there was course markings. So it's a little similar to other races, but definitely hardly any aid. Like I think I lived off of electrolytes and Cheetos most of the race.
It sounds delicious. Maybe.
Because my stomach was so messed up from the heat and humidity that I really, like all the food I brought, I just couldn't really eat it.
Yeah, that's really that does a number on you. Big weather changes, especially if you didn't train in that kind of environment, can really wreak havoc to your ability to eat, and then that can like severely affect your race, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some markings, but very few, right? It's only at major intersections and stuff, and then for the rest, you're on your own.
Yeah, there were like, I think major turns had, but there was a few minor ones that definitely didn't, and there was quite a few of those that didn't have it, and you got a map the evening before, but if you had no idea about the trails, it was pretty hard to like figure that map out. And I definitely know a lot of people went off course.
Mm-hmm. So definitely, so some markings, and you've got 400 people, but definitely fewer. And I mean, one advantage with 400 people is, I mean, if you compared it again to the big one, with like only 30-40 people, you're pretty much completely on your own unless you really want to stick with someone. With 400 people, you hope that you have some people around you that can give you some guidance if necessary, or does it even with that many people stretch out too far that you don't really get to see other people?
There's definitely like I was around people the whole time, so
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, there's quite a few people. It's like way more than I expected when I first signed up for the race.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Did did it live up to the hype? Did you feel like it was worth traveling all the way out there and battling the humidity and stuff? Do you feel like it was one of those bucket list races that is something that people should do?
If you're into that type of thing, like for me, it was definitely a bucket list race. Yeah, I know a lot of trail runners that just like no desire to go out to Tennessee, the woods of Tennessee, and romp around the forest. But the Briars definitely lived up to how people have talked about them.
Do you, for the Fall Classic, do you go up Red Jaw?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you take one of the most infamous climbs. So there is definitely some off trail travel then, even for the Fall Classic. So you get a good dose of the underbrush and the fighting with the terrain and with that uneven trails or whatever you even could consider trails.
Yeah. But I think by the time I got to the Briars, there was already a pretty clear path schwacked through, and a lot of people were recommending to hang back and wait for somebody to sacrifice themselves to the rat. So that wasn't as bad. But even then, it was still pretty bad. Everybody was getting scratched up the whole time.
Okay, that's hilarious. I let you go first. No, you're fine. Go ahead. Oh man, that's amazing. Okay. Well, that's a good. That's where it helps to have 400 people on the course, I guess. Right? There is a little bit of smart movement here. How was Laz? Do you like him as a guy? I can't quite read him because he is so smart with the media, and yet he looks so grumpy that he looks like he doesn't know what an iPhone is, and I feel like he's somewhere in between. How did you get a sense of who he is and stuff?
He was, I don't, I think he said it like he's a goofy hillbilly, and I think that kind of sums him up. But he was very nice, but I definitely felt like when he was lighting a cigarette at the beginning of Barkley Fall Classic, he kind of puts on his game face and is really trying to challenge everybody, and that's very apparent that he wants everybody to really challenge themselves. Yeah. And he's very like connected with the high school sports teams around the area, and I think a lot of money was raised through this race for the local sports teams. And we went to a football game, the local high school football team, and supported them because they were out on the course supporting us.
Oh, that's amazing.
During the race. So yeah, I thought he was a genuinely nice guy, but yeah, he definitely puts fear into you and trepidation about what you're gonna encounter out
there. I'm trying to figure out, is there a way that you can describe some of the hard sections, the sections where you sort of like questioned your life choices? I don't know, can you describe them a little bit?
Yeah, probably. If you can think of the steepest climbs you ever do off trail, there's sections like that, and yeah, but with briars on them. So there's people just splayed out on the side of the trail, and they just look completely toast on one of the power line cuts. And there's just there was so much carnage going up that. And for some reason, the first half of the race went terribly for me, and I was really delirious because of the humidity and heat. But by the second half, when we were going up steeper climbs, I felt great, and I was passing a bunch of people. And so just seeing people cramping and puking on those climbs, really showed how, and they were exposed and hot, direct sun in some places, unless you crawl through the briars and get in shade.
You got a choice here. You could be in exposed sunlight, or you can go through the briars. I'm like, that's fantastic. What am I doing here? So you, the first half, you had a terrible time, but then you were able to recover and turn it around. I mean, negative split, that's what races are all about. So good job, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the sections people were definitely sliding on their butts a lot. And so that, I think, showed how steep it was.
Yeah, especially if it's steep in sections where there isn't a clear defined trail, right? Because then every step you try to place, you don't even have good footing. And that, I mean, number one, you need a lot of strength to compensate for that uneven terrain. But mentally, it's also it's super frustrating and gets to you, right?
Yeah. And it was pretty muddy in some sections too.
I gotta be honest, I everything that I hear about this race, I absolutely hate about both of those races. I don't think I don't know if I'm not strong enough. I'm not proclaiming that I have some objective perspective of why I don't like the idea of racing these type of events. It's completely subjective. I don't know if I'm too weak, if I am not cut out for it, but it sounds absolutely awful. For you, clearly, and you do some super gnarly stuff, so obviously you like doing that kind of stuff, but do you feel like you got out of it what you went there for?
Yeah, I definitely did. I've had trouble finding races that I really like, that they just have that steepness. And yeah, it definitely reminded me, I think Crystal Mountain Sky Marathon was one that reminds me of it too, because there's just really steep climbs. There's so many races in America seem to be Western States type races where it's not as climby as a European race would be.
Yeah, I wonder if it's from a basic climbing, if it has something to do with permitting, that it's just too hard to get permits for trails that would be these kind of gnarly trails, right? Because if you think about the gnarliest trails that you can think of, the steepest trails, I mean, most of them are in national parks, right? Most of them are in locations where you'll just never get a permit. And so you end up having to compromise a little bit and end up then including a lot of trails that, yeah, you easily get a commercial permit for a place where a car can drive too, because as soon as there is car driving, then you get a permit, right?
Yeah, and yeah, that's why a lot of the Sky Marathon type races, like Broken Arrow, the Rut,
exactly,
they get pushed into
exactly.
ski
And
resorts.
then, while with Broken Arrow, there were some beautiful sections and there was a lot of steep stuff, but I was actually surprised when I ran it, especially how it's sold from a camera work and stuff. You actually run quite a bit on gravel roads, actually, right? Because it isn't ski resorts. Actually not really on some tough single track. Most of it is steep, but it's sort of reasonably easy terrain.
Yeah, I think a lot of my more leaning towards mountains rather than more runnable terrain, they don't necessarily like to race over here. and I think they would have a lot funner time in Europe with the races over there, and then the very few races that really get the most elevation gain per mile.
So for you,
here.
you keep talking about the steepness of the terrain, which is interesting because I guess that's something, because nobody ever takes their watch out for these type of events. We don't even actually know how much vert is in a race like that, and so therefore we talk about the evilness of the terrain, right? We talk about the briars, and we talk about the muddiness and the underbrush and all of the stuff that sort of saps your willingness to live out of you, but not actually the steepness. So that's interesting that that's something you went there for. I thought you'd just be a masochist and you just want to get beaten up by briars.
Yeah, I heard rumors like, prepare for 12,000 to 16,000 feet of gain and potentially like 40 miles.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody really knows how much there actually is.
How much actually is? Oh man, I mean, it totally is possible to track it out. I mean, you might not get 100% of route, but you obviously can bring your GPS 2 days after the race. I mean, you've just done the 50 miler, so you perhaps don't want to go back out there. But anybody could go out there. And now John Kelly has been out there and ran most of the trails and routes and stuff when he used to live next door, right?
Yeah, you can go out on the Candy Ass trails, which is the maintained park trails, but you're not supposed to go out on the off-trail backcountry areas outside of the race. So,
I guess that's a good point, right? I mean, if I think of state parks, that outside of a race where you have a specific permit to travel, I wouldn't be going off trail either. That's a good point. So it's tough to sort of follow it on your own term a month later or before or after, right? Yeah, that's a good point. All right, you came for vert, you got humidity, and you got briars, which is something that you knew you had to deal with. You got the vert. Did you come back satisfied? Did it really sort of give you what you were after?
Yeah, it definitely did. The experience was pretty great, and it was amazing meeting Laz and all the other runners. And there's definitely that community feel that you get at the really awesome races that are still holding it down. And yeah, I really wish I could have trained for the humidity. That was the one thing that I didn't like. I felt like a steamed crab at the beginning. Felt like there was boiling water just blasting my face and making me delirious and wanting to drop out.
You're like, any moment and I'm gonna pop open.
Yeah.
Oh man, that it's tough. I mean, I DNF'd at Zion, and it's an early season race, and I completely didn't account for the heat. Because I had no chance of training for it over the winter here in the Pacific Northwest. And so, I understand. And that's frustrating because that's something that, on one side, you can't account for it, but you can't really train for it, right? I mean, you can't really, in hindsight, you perhaps could have hung out in a sauna for a while. I don't know if that would have helped much.
Yeah, when I ran Hurt 100 miler, I did a lot of sauna and steam room, and that really helped. I think with Hurt, there was the coastal breezes, which helped with the heat and humidity. But yeah, getting a steam room and sauna beforehand would have probably been the key to getting over that hardship.
And with Hurt, it's nice to hang out in a sauna because Hurt is in January, right? So you can spend the winter when it's cold outside and you can hang out in the sauna.
Yeah.
But Barkley Fall Classic is in the fall, and when it's outside 85, the idea of being in a sauna isn't really that great. But it would have helped for training
Yeah.
for sure.
I think I went on maybe like 2 runs this summer before Barkley and just like a sweatshirt to try and get a little bit. But I definitely thought that the summer heat in Washington would account for it.
Well, and some days it perhaps would, but I mean, we just had so little precipitation, right? I feel like our whole second half of our summer was just bone dry.
Yeah. And whenever there is precipitation or humidity, I feel like it drops down to 45 or 50 degrees.
Yeah, it cools then because often the precipitation comes from the Pacific, right? And so that brings in cold air with it.
Yeah.
All right. This was Barkley Fall Classic. I wish I would have a live audience because I think we would have some questions that I can't think of. Is there anything that we didn't talk about? It is such a unique race, and clearly the people who sign up for a race like that, they are all of similar mindset as you. Meaning they want the insane steepness. They're aware of the briars. They're willing to challenge themselves in an environment that is so unique compared to other races. And on top of that, even made unique purposely by having fewer aid stations, very little markings. I mean, it is not just a hard race. It is then on top of it made hard.
Yeah, it's definitely meant to bite you in the ass.
It's definitely meant to bite you in the ass. Well, some people, and that includes you, are signing up for stuff like that, which I find fascinating because you talk about you want steep trails like in Europe, but I mean, the reason why I want steep trails like in Europe is because you are on some glorious mountain and you see glacial mountaintops around you and you are in this alpine terrain. I mean, in Tennessee, you might get some views, but what do you end up going to see? More trees in the distance? Like, it's like, I don't want to sound negative about Tennessee, but you might get a lot of vert, but you don't get gigantic, glorious panoramas, right?
Yeah, not really. I think the most open it was by the prison, and you just got to like look up at the torture that was gonna happen later because you see how steep the hills are.
And you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have not been able to see that. It would have just like given me enough underbrush so I don't know where I'm going.
But the forest was definitely prettier than I thought it would be. Because it looks so dull and gray in all the pictures and videos from winter. And so I was pretty surprised by that. I did a short hike after the race, and it was just like very beautiful walking along a river and seeing all the weird plants and insects and beautiful rocks.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds very awesome. So that was Barkley Fall Classic. So now it's wintertime. What's next for you? Are you somebody who goes for sort of a dedicated off season where for a few weeks you do nothing? Do you put on skis? What does your winter activities look like?
I tend to start focusing on shorter, faster efforts. So about 2 weeks ago, I did a 10-kilometer race, which feels like a sprint compared to 50 Ks. And
yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I think I might focus in on trail marathon at some point in the winter. And I do also like to get on skis. I like split boarding the most. And I have done ski mountaineering races Washington.
Oh, you've actually done ski mountaineering races. Oh, that's cool. That's so European of you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't even know that we had skimo races over here. I know you can do backcountry skimo, but I didn't know there were actual races.
Yeah, Snow Goat Skimo puts on some pretty awesome races around the ski resorts here in Washington.
Oh, that's cool. All right. So surprises me a little bit. I didn't see you as somebody who does so many races. I saw you as more of an adventurer, which I guess is my wrong perception because that's how we initially met many moons ago. You were running Beast of Big Creek. That surprised I suppose not. That surprised me. The way I should phrase it is that I saw you more of an adventurer as a racer, and so it surprised me that you're running so many races. But I guess that's how we met initially many years ago, by you running Beast of Big Creek.
Yeah, I've definitely focused more on adventures, and I think I post photos of them more than I do of races. Because I think there's like a focus in on one race per year. And that's like all I really think about. But then there's other races that I do that would be like B or C or D races.
Nice. Well, that's good. Do you have anything on the horizon for 23 already?
In terms of races or adventures or both?
Races.
I'm thinking about the Sawtooth 100-miler. Or not the Sawtooth 100-miler, the Teanaway Country 100-miler.
Okay, yes. Yeah. That is equally known to be very, very hard, right?
Yeah.
Have you done 100-miler before?
Yeah, I've done...
Oh, you did hurt. Yeah.
I've done about 4 or 5 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Teanaway sounds amazing.
Yeah, I like how they describe it as a low elevation hard rock.
Yeah, exactly. That seems like, based on the description, that seems like something that would attract somebody like you. No, not just attract to it, but actually somebody who can actually finish it.
Yeah, I attempted it back in 2021, and I got to mile 60 and threw in the towel.
Oh, okay. Was it?
Want to go back?
Yeah, there we go. There's some redemption that is calling out for you. Nice. Well, awesome. It was fascinating to get sort of a little bit of an inside view of what Barkley Fall Classic is all about, and I loved in reading in the description. I just went to Laz's website before and he describes sort of his partnership with the high school. I'm glad you brought that up and you experienced that, because reading the little description, it wasn't really quite clear what that would look like. So it's cool to see how he ties sort of an event that has a global followership back into the community, which is unique and special, right?
Yeah.
Well, cool. All right, Jeremy. Thank you so much for jumping back on and sharing your story. I hope you have a relaxed and wonderful holiday season, and I hope we see each other on the trail sometime.
Yeah, thank you for having me back on.
Of course.
It's been great talking.